Okay, so on page 6 of this little mini packet, we're going to learn how to solve equations by clearing them of fractions. Okay, so here it says to clear an equation of fractions, first ask yourself, do I need to clear? If there's only one fraction, then you can apply SADMIP, get rid of that fraction, and continue. So sometimes when there's only one fraction, you may not want to get rid of it. We did see some where there was only one fraction, and we did get rid of it. And we do that by finding the least common denominator. But if you have a bunch of fractions, you find the least common denominator, you rename all the fractions with the common denominator, and then you multiply by the common denominator and solve. So let me show you how to do that. We'll get an example. So here, there's two different fractions. So I want to get rid of the fractions. I see 1/2 and 3/8. So my common denominator is going to be 8. So that means I want to rename 1/2 as 4/8. So 4/8 d plus 3/8 equals, and this is really negative 2d over 1. So if I want to make it something over 8, it's going to be negative 16d over 8. Now, every fraction has a common denominator, and I multiply by that common denominator. When I do that, all of the 8s cancel out, and I am left with 4d plus 3 equals negative 16d, which looks much easier to solve than this. So now I subtract 4d from both sides. I get 3 equals negative 20d. I divide by negative 20, divide by negative 20, and my answer is negative 3 over 20. Okay, so let's try another one. So now this next one, you see 3 fractions. So obviously, I want to get rid of those fractions. I have a 4, a 2, and a 3. My common denominator is going to be 12. So that means I want to rename each fraction to have a denominator of 12. Well, 4 goes into 12 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. So 3/4 x is the same as 9/12 x. Plus 2 goes into 12 6 times. 6 times 1. This is 6/12. And 3 goes into 12 4 times. This becomes 8/12. So now that they're all renamed to have a denominator of 12, I multiply both sides by 12. They all cancel out, and I get 9x plus 6 equals 8, which again looks so much better than this. I subtract 6, 9x equals 2, divide by 9, divide by 9, x equals 2/9. Okay, so you can try the next one on your own. Stop the video and turn it on when you're done to see if you get the same answer as me. So I see a 6, a 5, and a 1. My common denominator is going to be 30 plus 30 equals 30. 6 goes into 35 times, so that's 5x. 5 goes into 36 times, so that's 6x. 1 goes into 30 times, so this becomes 330. If I multiply this side by 30, these cancel out. This side by 30, that cancels out. So I end up with 11x equals 330. Divide by 11, divide by 11, x equals 30. Okay. Now here I only have one fraction, but I could still multiply both sides by 5, or I could say that I'm going to rename the 6 as something over 5. So this would be 6 over 1. 1 goes into 5 times. So 30 over 5 is the same as 6. And now I multiply everything by 5, and I get 2x plus 8 equals 30. Minus 8 minus 8, 2x equals 22. Divide by 2, divide by 2, x equals 11. Okay. So now let's look at number 5. So number 5 says, compare how to solve these equations. So here, for number 5, 1/2 times 12n minus 2. Two different ways I can do that. And that's because if I multiply 12 by 1/2, I can get 6n and get rid of the fraction. If I multiply -2 by 1/2, I get -1. So I was able to distribute the fraction and end up with no fractions. Since I could do that, that's one way to do it. Then I subtract 5n from both sides, and I get n minus 1 equals -7. If I add 1 to both sides, I get n equals -6. Okay? Now, another way I could have solved this is I could have said, okay, I'm going to multiply this side by 2 and this side by 2. I only multiply grandma. That goes away. 12n minus 2 equals 10n minus 14. Minus 10n minus 10n. 2n minus 2 equals -14. Add 2, add 2. 2n equals -12. N equals -6. So I could have done it two different ways. So if by distributing the fraction you get rid of fractions, like in this example, go ahead and distribute. Now look at this one. Why wouldn't I want to distribute 1/3 to those numbers? Because then I'd be creating two fractions. So I could multiply this side by 3 and this side by 3. Only grandma gets multiplied. The fraction goes away. So that stays the same. And this becomes 12y plus 48. I subtract 10y from both sides. I get 2y plus 48 equals -4. Subtract 48 from both sides. 2y equals -52. And y equals -26. So that would be an example where I'd want to get rid of the fraction because distributing the fraction would create more fractions. Now, for this last one, obviously I'm going to try to get rid of the fractions because there's 3. My common denominator is going to be 12. 1/2 x becomes 6/12 x. 2/3 becomes 8/12. And 3/4 becomes 9/12. I multiply both sides by 12, getting rid of all of them. I get 6x plus 8 equals 9. Subtract 8, subtract 8. 6x equals 1. Divide by 6, divide by 6. And this answer is x equals 1/6. Okay, so again, to review, if you can rename all the fractions to have a common denominator, then you multiply by the common denominator, and that gets rid of all your fractions.